hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The ping of metal against metal echoed through the garage as Bo Marlowe tightened the bolt on the vintage Harley's engine block. His movements were precise, economical, nothing wasted. Across from him, Junie sat cross-legged on an overturned milk crate, a wrench in one hand and a half-eaten sandwich in the other. "Hand me that 5/8 socket," Bo said, extending his palm without looking up. Junie placed it in his hand. This was their ritual on Wednesday nights, the precious hours before tomorrow's pickup. They didn't need to talk much. The mechanical dialogue of tools and engine parts said enough. "Pete at school says his mom is dating again," Junie said after a while, her voice deliberately casual as she twisted a rag between her fingers. "He says she brings home a new guy every month." Bo grunted, sliding under the bike to check the oil filter. "That right?" "Yeah." Junie picked at a thread on her jeans. "How come you don't date?" The question hung in the air, mingling with the scent of motor oil and the faint classic rock playing from the old radio in the corner. Bo slid back out, his face unreadable except for the slight tightening around his eyes. "You don't rebuild what you never wanted in the first place," he said finally, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Junie nodded, like she'd expected exactly that answer. As she reached for her soda, the sleeve of her flannel shirt rode up. Bo's eyes caught on the fading yellow-green bruise circling her forearm like a bracelet. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Junie quickly tugged her sleeve down, but the damage was done. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away. "Dad, it's nothing." Bo set down his wrench with deliberate care. "We both know that's not true. She just grabbed me. I was being difficult." "What kind of difficult?" Junie shrugged. "I didn't want to try on the clothes she bought. They were stupid, all pink and sparkly." Bo nodded once, like he was filing the information away. He picked up his wrench again, but his knuckles were white around the handle. "You know you can tell me," he said, voice low and even. "Anything that happens there." "I know." Junie's voice was small, but she didn't look up. "But then you'd have to do something, and she'd make it worse." The truth of her words hung between them like smoke. Bo knew the system. He'd already tried twice to modify the custody arrangement, but Lena knew how to perform how to cry on command, how to make him look like the unstable one. "We got 2 hours before dinner," Bo said finally, changing the subject. "Let's see if we can get this carburetor cleaned." What neither of them said was that not everything broken could be fixed. Thursday afternoon arrived with the inevitability of a thunderstorm. Bo stood in the driveway, hands in the pockets of his worn jeans, waiting. Junie's overnight bag sat at his feet. She'd been quiet all morning, eating her cereal in small, mechanical bites. Not meeting his eyes, the rumble of an approaching engine made them both straighten. A glossy white SUV with custom rims swung into the driveway, tires crunching on gravel. The windows were tinted, but Bo could make out Lena's silhouette behind the wheel. Junie's fingers found the edge of Bo's jacket, tugging slightly. An unconscious gesture from earlier days. "You call me if you need anything," Bo said, looking down at his daughter. "Anytime." "I know, Dad." Her voice was steady, but her eyes kept darting to the SUV. "I'll be fine." The driver's door swung open, and Lena Hollis emerged like an actress making an entrance. Her blonde hair was styled in beachy waves, her lips painted a perfect shade of pink. She wore white jeans and a silk blouse that caught the light as she moved. Designer sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the slight sway in her step. "Junie Bug," she called, voice bright but slightly too loud. "There's my girl." Bo felt his jaw clench. Pills. Not enough to be obviously high, but enough to blur the edges. "Hi, Mom," Junie said, picking up her bag. Lena came around the car and engulfed Junie in a cloud of expensive perfume. "I've been thinking about you all week." She pulled back, holding Junie at arm's length. "Oh, sweetie, what are you wearing?" Junie glanced down at her jeans and flannel shirt. "Clothes. You're not wearing that all weekend, right?" Lena laughed, the sound brittle. "I bought you that adorable dress. The blue one. We're going to dinner at Roberto's tonight." Bo stepped forward. "Lena, she has a math test Monday. She needs study time." Lena's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind her sunglasses. "Always the worrier, Bo. She'll be fine. It's just dinner." She turned her attention back to Junie. Let's get going, baby. We have so much to catch up on. Bo watched as Lena steered Junie toward the SUV, one manicured hand firmly on her shoulder. He stepped forward, needing to say something else to Junie, something reassuring. Junie, remember what we talked about. The car door slammed shut mid-sentence. Lena circled back to the driver's side, tossing a wave over her shoulder. She'll call you Sunday, she called, sliding into the seat. The SUV backed out with a spray of gravel. In the passenger seat, Junie sat still as stone, her expression unreadable through the tinted glass. Bo stood in the driveway long after they disappeared, hands fisted in his pockets. The custody arrangement had seemed reasonable 3 years ago, when the divorce was fresh and Lena was playing the devoted mother role. Now it was a prison sentence for Junie 2 weekends a month, and every other holiday in a house with no rules except Lena's whims. The worst part wasn't the clothes or the missed study time. It was the way Junie came back different each time, quieter, more watchful, like she was bracing for something. The house that Lena had bought with her new boyfriend's money sat in a gated community on the edge of town, all stone and glass and unnecessary angles. Inside, Junie dropped her bag by the door, taking in the familiar chaos. Music blared from hidden speakers, some thumping pop song that made her teeth hurt. Avery, Lena called out, tossing her keys into a crystal bowl. We're home. Avery Creighton emerged from the home gym off the main hallway, still in his workout clothes, tight black shorts, and a tank top that showed off arms sculpted by daily gym sessions and whatever supplements he was taking that month. There she is, he said, giving Junie an exaggerated wink. The smartest Marlowe. Junie forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hi, Avery. He came closer, ruffling her hair with a hand that lingered a second too long. Getting taller every time I see you. Pretty soon you'll be as gorgeous as your mom. Lena preened at this, sliding an arm around his waist. She got all my good genes, thank God. She pressed herself against him, suddenly all liquid movement. I missed you today. Avery's hand slid down to squeeze Lena's hip. Show me how much. Junie looked away, cheeks burning. This was how it always started the weekend of pretending not to notice what happened between them. The drinking, the pills, the displays that were never quite private enough. I'm gonna put my stuff in my room, she muttered, grabbing her bag. Oh, Lena pulled away from Avery, suddenly remembering her daughter. We're leaving at 7 for dinner. Wear the blue dress I put in your closet last week. I brought homework. You can do it Sunday. Lena cut her off with a wave. Tonight is family night. Family. As if this house with its cold stone and too many mirrors was anything like a family. Junie nodded and headed up the spiral staircase to the guest room that Lena called her room, despite the fact that nothing in it belonged to her. 3 hours later, Junie sat stiffly at a corner table in Roberto's, picking at an overpriced pasta dish while Lena and Avery talked over her, their voices getting louder with each glass of wine. Lena wore a dress that dipped too low, laughed too hard at Avery's jokes. Her eyes had the glassy look that meant she'd taken something in the car before they arrived. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. By the time they got home, Lena was fully high, stumbling slightly as she kicked off her heels in the foyer. Avery was right behind her, his hands already at the zipper of her dress. Junie, go to your room, Lena said, giggling as Avery pressed her against the wall. Grown-up time. Junie didn't need to be told twice. She retreated upstairs, closing her bedroom door firmly behind her. From downstairs came the sound of breaking glass, followed by Lena's high-pitched laughter. Music started something with a heavy bass that vibrated through the floor. Junie put in her earbuds and turned up her own music, trying to drown it out. She must have fallen asleep eventually, because she woke with a start hours later. The house was quieter now, her room dark except for the strip of light under the door. Junie checked her phone, 2:17 a.m. Her mouth was dry. She needed water. Quietly, she opened her door and padded down the hallway toward the stairs. The house felt different at night, less showy, more honest in its emptiness. She moved carefully, not wanting to wake anyone as she reached the bottom of the stairs. A sound from the living room made her freeze. A low moan, followed by a harsh whisper. She took those last few steps, peered around the corner into the sunken living room. What she saw burned itself in her brain in terrible clarity. Lena sprawled across the white leather couch, naked except for her jewelry, her head thrown back in abandon. Avery's muscled back moving rhythmically above her. The coffee table knocked askew. A bag of white powder spilled across the glass surface. Junie must have made a sound of gasp, a step back because suddenly Lena's eyes snapped open, fixing directly on her daughter, standing frozen in the archway. For one horrible moment, nobody moved. Then Lena's face contorted, transforming from pleasure to rage in an instant. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, shoving at Avery. "Get off me." Avery turned, saw Junie, and swore, scrambling to cover himself. Junie backed away, heart hammering. "I'm sorry. I just wanted water." "You little spy." Lena screamed, staggering to her feet, naked and swaying. "You were watching us? What's wrong with you?" "No, I wasn't. I didn't mean to." Lena lunged forward, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy crystal vase. "I give you everything," she spat. "And this is how you repay me? Sneaking around? Spy?" "Lena, calm down." Avery started, but his voice was slurred, detached. "It happened so fast." The vase left Lena's hand, arcing through the air toward Junie's head. Junie ducked, and the vase shattered against the wall behind her with a sound like the world breaking apart. In the sudden silence that followed, Junie ran up the stairs into her room, slamming the door behind her and pushing the desk chair into the handle. Her hands shook so badly she could barely manage it. From downstairs came the sound of Lena still screaming, Avery trying to calm her. Something else breaking. Footsteps on the stairs. "Junie." Lena's voice, slurred but venomous. "Open this door right now." Junie said nothing, frozen in place. "You think you can disrespect me in my own house?" Lena pounded on the door. "I'm your mother. Open the door." The pounding continued, punctuated by threats and curses. Junie slid down the wall, knees pulled to her chest, hands over her ears. Eventually, Avery's voice joined Lena's, lower, coaxing. "Come on, babe. She's not worth it. Let's go to bed." More arguing, Lena's voice breaking on particularly vicious threats. Then, finally retreating footsteps. Silence. Junie didn't move from her corner until morning light filtered through the blinds. Bo knew something was wrong the moment Lena's SUV pulled into the driveway on Sunday. Junie was in the passenger seat, face turned away, shoulders hunched. Lena didn't get out of the car, just unlocked the doors and waited, sunglasses firmly in place despite the cloudy day. Junie climbed out slowly, grabbed her bag from the back seat, and walked toward the house without a backward glance. The SUV peeled away before she'd even reached the porch steps. "Hey," Bo said, holding the door open. "How was your weekend?" Junie brushed past him without a word, head down, making a beeline for her bedroom. The door closed with a soft click that was somehow worse than a slam. Bo stood in the hallway, a cold feeling settling in his gut. Over the years, he'd learned to read his daughter's silences like a language. This wasn't her usual post-Lena withdrawal. This was something worse. He gave her an hour before knocking gently on her door. "Junie, dinner's almost ready." No answer. "I made that pasta you like. With the garlic bread." Still nothing. "I'm coming in, okay." He pushed the door open slowly. Junie lay on her bed, still in her jacket, staring at the ceiling. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't even blink. Bo sat on the edge of the bed, careful to keep space between them. "Talk to me, June." "I'm not hungry," she said, voice flat. "That's okay. We can eat later." He studied her profile, noting the shadows under her eyes. "Did something happen this weekend?" Junie's jaw tightened, but she shook her head. "You know you can tell me anything," Bo said carefully. "Whatever it is. Can I?" Junie finally turned to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Even if it makes things worse." The question hit Bo like a physical blow. Because she was right, there was no guarantee he could protect her. The courts, the system, even the police had failed them before. "I want to help," he said finally, the words inadequate even to his own ears. Junie said nothing for so long that Bo thought she wasn't going to speak at all. Then, in a voice so small he had to lean forward to hear, "She didn't let me sleep all weekend." Bo waited, knowing there was more. "She was mad at me." For seeing something I shouldn't have. She and Avery were on the couch. They didn't know I was there. Junie swallowed hard. She threw a vase at me. Beau's hands curled into fists, but he kept his face neutral, knowing Junie was watching for his reaction. Did it hit you? No. It broke against the wall. Did she hurt you? He asked, his voice controlled despite the rage building in his chest. Junie hesitated, then slowly sat up. She unzipped her jacket and pulled it off. There, on her right shoulder, was an angry red welt, already darkening to purple. The distinct shape of a handprint. She hit me because I saw, Junie whispered, and then she wouldn't let me out of the house all weekend. She took my phone, said I couldn't be trusted. Something shifted in Beau's chest, to tectonic movement, deep and irrevocable. The careful control he'd maintained for years in the name of peace, in the name of not making things worse, cracked open. In its place, a cold certainty took root. This ended now that he didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he nodded once and gently brushed Junie's hair back from her face. I'm going to make a call, he said, his voice steady. Then we'll eat. You need to sleep tonight. Who are you calling? Junie asked, a hint of fear in her voice. Dory first, then a lawyer I know. Dad, please don't make it worse, Junie pleaded. She'll be so angry if you try to change the custody again. Beau stood, his decision already made. I'm not changing the custody, Junie. I'm ending it. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, certified mail in a heavy cream envelope with a law firm's embossed logo in the corner. Beau knew what it was before he even opened it. He'd been expecting something like this for 3 weeks, ever since he'd filed the police report about Junie's bruises and the social worker had come to interview them both. What he hadn't expected was the sheer audacity of it. Full custody. Dory stood in Beau's kitchen, reading over his shoulder, voice rising in disbelief. She's filing for full custody? After what she did to Junie? Beau set the letter down on the counter, his face impassive despite the storm building inside him. She's claiming I'm neglectful. Says Junie is becoming unstable under my influence. Dory swore, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. At 40, she carried herself with a no-nonsense efficiency of someone who'd seen too much in her years as an EMT. Her dark hair was cropped short, practical, with strands of gray she didn't bother to hide. This is insane, Dory said, jabbing a finger at the letter. You're the most conscientious parent I know. And after what that woman did, it's not about the truth, Beau interrupted, his voice flat. It's about who tells the better story. He flipped to the second page, where Lena's attorney had attached evidence of Beau's supposed failings as a father. Cherry-picked text messages where he'd been short with Lena, a report from Junie's school about her withdrawn behavior. Even an old therapist's evaluation from right after the divorce that mentioned Beau's emotional numbness as a concern. She's been planning this, Beau said, the realization settling coldly in his gut. For months, maybe longer, building a case piece by piece. What about the police report? The bruises? She'll say Junie got them here, or that she's clumsy, or that I coached her. Beau shook his head. Lena knows how to work the system. She only hits where it doesn't show, most of the time, and she can cry on command. Dory pulled out a chair and sat heavily. So what do we do? Counterfile? No, Beau said, folding the letter deliberately and sliding it back into the envelope. That's what she expects. What we need is irrefutable proof. Like what? You've already documented the bruises. Beau's eyes drifted to the kitchen drawer where the GoPro now sat, freshly charged with a new memory card. We need her own words, her own actions, proof no judge can ignore. The back door opened, and they both turned as Junie walked in from the school bus, backpack slung over one shoulder. She stopped when she saw their faces. What happened? She asked, immediately alert to the tension in the room. Beau and Dory exchanged a look. They'd agreed not to burden Junie with the details until they had a plan. But looking at his daughter, now, the wariness in her eyes, the way she braced herself for bad news, Beau realized she was already carrying burdens no child should have to bear. Your mom filed for full custody, he said simply. Junie went very still, her face draining of color. She can't do that. She's trying, Beau confirmed. but we're not going to let it happen. How? Junie's voice cracked slightly. She always gets what she wants. She'll lie. She'll make you look bad. Not this time, Bo said, decision crystallizing. This time, we're going to show everyone exactly who she is. He crossed to the drawer and pulled out the GoPro, holding it up. You know how to use one of these? Junie nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You want me to record her? Only if you're willing, Bo said carefully. It will be when you visit this weekend. Hidden in your backpack, maybe, or your lamp. Junie stared at the camera for a long moment, then at her father. Something shifted in her expression, fear, giving way to a quiet resolve that was far too adult for her 13 years. I can do it, she said. I'll record everything. The weekend loomed like a storm on the horizon. Bo spent Thursday night teaching Junie how to use the GoPro, how to check that it was recording, how to hide it effectively. They practiced with different positions in her backpack, clipped to the inside of her jacket, hidden in plain sight as a decoration on her bedside lamp. The important thing is to act normal, Bo emphasized, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Don't check on it too often. Don't let her see you looking at it. Junie nodded, solemn-faced as she practiced sliding the small camera into the side pocket of her backpack. What if she searches my stuff? Has she ever done that before? No, she doesn't care enough. Bo ignored the pang those words caused, focusing on the practical. Then she probably won't start now. But just in case, I got you this too. He placed a small notebook on the table, ordinary looking with a blue cover. A journal? Junie picked it up, flipping through the blank pages. Evidence doesn't have to be video, Bo explained. Write down what happens when it happens. Times, dates, exactly what she says. It's harder to dismiss a pattern. Junie traced the cover with her finger, thoughtful. I used to keep a diary before, but I stopped because I was afraid she'd read it. This isn't a diary, Bo said carefully. It's a record, and sometimes writing things down helps make sense of them. Like building a case, Junie said, understanding. Like those crime shows where they gather evidence. Exactly like that. Bo watched his daughter's face, the way she was processing this, turning fear into purpose. He'd seen the same transformation in himself years ago, after the divorce, when he'd had to rebuild his life around Junie's needs. Friday afternoon came too quickly. As Bo watched Lena's SUV drive away with Junie inside, he felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He was sending his child into danger, armed with nothing but a camera and a notebook. The thought made him sick, but for the first time in years, they were fighting back, taking control of a situation that had spiraled for too long. And Junie's face as she'd left resolute, focused, gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, they could win this time. The weekend crawled by in agonizing slowness. Bo's phone remained silent, except for the location pings. Junie was at Lena's house, then at a mall, then back at the house. No emergency texts, no calls. Sunday evening, when the SUV pulled up exactly at 5, Bo was waiting on the porch, tense as a coiled spring. Junie emerged looking tired but composed. She gave him a small nod as she approached mission accomplished. Once inside, she carefully unpacked her bag, removing the GoPro from where it had been hidden in the lining of her jacket. Did you get anything? Bo asked, keeping his voice neutral despite his racing heart. Yes, Junie said simply. She pulled out the notebook as well, now half filled with her neat handwriting. And I wrote everything down. Times, dates, exactly what she said. Like you told me. Bo took the camera, plugging it into his laptop. You okay? Junie considered the question, her face serious beyond her years. I think so. It was different. Being there, but having a purpose. Watching her instead of just trying to stay out of her way. Different how? Like, she searched for the words. Like I had power to, even if she didn't know it. The footage loaded onto the computer, hours of it, from various angles. Some just showing empty rooms, the camera hidden while Junie was elsewhere. But there were valuable moments too. Lena berating Junie for not wearing the clothes she'd bought, her words slurred from whatever she'd taken that afternoon. Lena and Avery fighting in the kitchen, throwing pointed barbs at each other until Avery stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. And Lena's face when she turned her rage on Junie instead, demanding to know why she couldn't be a normal daughter who appreciated what she had. It wasn't physical abuse. Lena was too careful for that, especially after the police report, but the emotional cruelty was stark. The manipulation, the narcissism that made everything about her own feelings, her own needs. "This is good," Bo said, his voice tight as he watched Lena mock Junie's outfit. Her voice, her weird obsession with getting good grades. "Really good. There's more in the journal," Junie said, handing it to him. "The stuff that happened when I couldn't record." Bo flipped through the pages, a chill running through him as he read Junie's methodical account of the weekend. The casual cruelty, the neglect, the way Lena had locked her out of the house for 2 hours on Saturday because Junie had ruined the vibe by asking about dinner. "You did great," he said, closing the notebook. "Really great, Junie." She nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Is it enough?" "It's a start," Bo said honestly. "We've got 2 more weekends before the hearing. If we can get more like this, I will," Junie said, a new confidence in her voice. "I'm not scared of her anymore, Dad. I'm angry." Bo recognized the tone, the same cold fury that had been driving him for years. It wasn't healthy, maybe, but it was effective. Anger could be fuel when nothing else was left. The second weekend's footage was more of the same. Lena's casual cruelty, her neglect, her preoccupation with Avery, and whatever chemical escape they were chasing that day. Useful but not definitive. Not the kind of smoking gun that would convince a skeptical judge to overturn years of custody arrangements. "We need something more concrete," Bo told Dory as they reviewed the videos in his kitchen, Junie already asleep in her room. "Something undeniable." "This emotional abuse is pretty damning," Dory argued, gesturing to the screen where Lena could be seen mocking Junie for asking about homework time. "It's awful," Bo agreed, "but it's also subjective. Lena will say she was joking, that Junie is too sensitive, that I've poisoned her against her mother. We need something no one can explain away." The final weekend before the hearing arrived with a sense of last chances. Junie packed her bag methodically, the GoPro and journal now familiar tools. But this time, Bo noticed a different energy about her, a quiet determination that bordered on recklessness. "Remember to be careful," he warned as they waited for Lena's car. "Don't provoke her." "I won't," Junie promised, but there was something in her eyes that made Bo uneasy. "The point is to document what happens naturally," he pressed, "not to create situations." Junie nodded, but her gaze had already shifted to the approaching SUV. "I know what I'm doing, Dad." Before Bo could respond, Lena pulled into the driveway, honking impatiently. Junie grabbed her bag and was gone with barely a goodbye, leaving Bo with a pit in his stomach and the sense that something had been set in motion that he couldn't control. The weekend passed with the usual location pings, but no emergency texts. By Sunday afternoon, Bo had nearly convinced himself that his worry was unfounded, that Junie was being careful, sticking to the plan. Then the SUV pulled up 2 hours early, and Lena practically shoved Junie out the passenger door before speeding away with a squeal of tires. Junie walked up the driveway slowly, one arm curled protectively around her ribs. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "What happened?" Bo demanded, rushing to meet her. "Are you hurt?" Junie shook her head once, brushing past him into the house. She went straight to her backpack, pulling out the GoPro with shaking hands. "You need to see this," she said, her voice hoarse. "Now." Bo plugged the camera into the TV instead of his laptop, allowing the footage to play on the larger screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. The camera was hidden in Junie's hoodie, pointing outward from what must have been a chest pocket. The angle was slightly tilted, but the kitchen of Lena's house was clearly visible. Avery sat at the island, scrolling through his phone, an empty plate in front of him. Beer bottles littered the counter. Lena's voice came from off-camera. "Junie, clean this up. Avery and I are going out." The camera moved as Junie approached the island. "That's Avery's mess. Why do I have to clean it?" A dangerous pause. Then Lena stepped into frame, her face tight with barely controlled rage. "What did you just say to me?" I said. Junie's voice was calm but firm. "That I'm not cleaning up after Avery. He's a grown man. He can do it himself." Avery looked up from his phone, a smirk playing at his lips. "Ooh, someone grew a backbone." Shut up. Lena snapped at him before turning back to Junie. You'll do what I tell you to do in my house. Clean it up. Now. No. The single word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Bo felt his chest tighten as he realized what Junie had done. She deliberately provoked Lena, knowing what would happen. On screen, Lena's face transformed, shock giving way to fury. What did you say to me? I said no. Junie repeated, still unervingly calm. I'm not your maid. I'm not here to clean up after your boyfriend. I have homework to do. What happened next was so fast, it was almost a blur. Lena's hand connecting with Junie's face in a vicious slap that sent the camera jerking sideways. A glimpse of the floor, then the ceiling, as Junie staggered backward. You ungrateful little bitch. Lena's voice, venomous now. After everything I do for you? The camera stabilized as Junie regained her balance. Lena was advancing on her, fists clenched. What do you do for me? Junie's voice was stronger now, challenging. You ignore me unless you need someone to show off to your friends. You leave me alone in the house for hours. You're high most of the time I'm here. Shut up. Lena shrieked, lunging forward. This time the camera captured everything in horrific detail. Lena's hand striking Junie's face again, then grabbing her arm, throwing her to the floor with surprising strength. The impact as Junie fell. And worst of all, the deliberate kick Lena delivered to Junie's side as she lay curled on the tile. Know your place, Lena spat, standing over her. You think your father wants you? He stuck with you. At least I'm honest about what a disappointment you are. In the background, Avery watched the whole thing with detached interest, like it was a mildly entertaining TV show. Damn, Lena, he said finally. Take it easy. You'll leave marks. Only then did Lena seem to remember herself, stepping back with a shaky laugh. She'll be fine. She's tough. Aren't you, Junebug? Get up and clean this mess, and maybe we'll bring you back something from dinner. The footage continued for another minute, Junie struggling to her feet, the camera capturing glimpses of the floor, the counter finally stabilizing as she stood. Her breathing was ragged, pained. I need to use the bathroom, Junie's voice said, remarkably steady. Fine. Don't take forever. Lena had already lost interest, turning back to Avery. We should go if we want to make our reservation. The camera moved as Junie walked out of the kitchen and down the hall to the bathroom. Once inside, she took off the hoodie and positioned the camera on the sink, facing the mirror. What it captured next was methodical, deliberate. Junie lifting her shirt to reveal an angry red mark on her ribs where Lena had kicked her. She turned slowly, showing the camera the growing bruise on her cheek, the finger marks on her arm. Sunday, October 10th, approximately 2:30 p.m., she narrated quietly. My mother, Lena Hollis, assaulted me for refusing to clean up after her boyfriend, Avery Creighton. This is the third time she has hit me this month, and the first time she has kicked me. The footage ended there, cutting to black. Bo sat frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The rage inside him was so complete it had circled back around to an eerie calm, a stillness like the eye of a hurricane. Beside him, Junie waited, watching his face. You provoked her on purpose, he said finally, his voice barely recognizable. Yes, she could have hurt you worse. She was always going to hurt me eventually, Junie said with a shrug that made her wince. This way, we got it on camera. The hospital visit confirmed what Bo had suspected: no broken ribs, but deep bruising that would take weeks to heal. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, documented everything meticulously, taking photographs that would become part of the official record. This will be reported to Child Services, she told Bo as she finished her examination. It's standard procedure. Good, Bo said. We want to report it. We have a custody hearing on Thursday. The doctor's eyes flickered with understanding. I'll make sure my report is filed by tomorrow. On Monday morning, Bo called their lawyer, Carl Jensen, and sent him the video footage along with the hospital report. By afternoon, they had an emergency meeting scheduled with Nessa Dorn, the court-appointed child advocate assigned to Junie's case. She needs to see this before Thursday, Bo explained to Junie as they drove to Nessa's office. Her recommendation carries a lot of weight with the judge. Junie nodded, staring out the window. She'd been quieter since yesterday, the adrenaline of her plan giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to a vivid purple, impossible to hide. Nessa Dorn's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of place that tried to feel homey despite the serious work done inside. She met them in the lobby, a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and piercing blue eyes. At 44, she carried herself with the efficient authority of someone who had seen the worst of what families could do to each other, and somehow kept her compassion intact. "Junie," she said warmly, then her eyes caught on the bruise. Her expression didn't change, but something hardened in her gaze. "Why don't you come with me? Your dad can wait here." Bo squeezed Junie's shoulder gently. "I'll be right here." He watched them disappear down the hallway, anxiety churning in his gut. Nessa had been assigned to their case 3 weeks ago, and so far, her reports had been neutral to the point of being unhelpful. She'd visited both houses, interviewed both parents, and come away with the professional assessment that both homes were adequate for Junie's needs. But that was before the video, before the hospital report, before the evidence that couldn't be explained away. 45 minutes later, Junie emerged alone, her face pale but composed. She sat next to Bo without a word. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "She wants to talk to you now." Nessa appeared in the doorway, her face unreadable. "Mr. Marlowe? This way, please." Bo followed her down the hall to a small office lined with children's drawings and professional certifications. Nessa closed the door behind them and gestured for him to sit. "I've reviewed the video Junie provided," she said without preamble. "And I've read the hospital report." Bo waited, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Why didn't you call the police immediately?" Nessa asked, her tone carefully neutral. The question hit Bo like a slap. "I want to make sure Junie was okay first. Get her checked out. Then talk to our lawyer. Ms. Hollis is claiming Junie staged the whole thing," Nessa continued. "That you coached her to provoke an incident to bolster your custody case." "Of course she was." Rage flared in Bo's chest, but he kept his voice steady. "That's absurd. Why would I ever put my daughter in harm's way?" "To win," Nessa said simply. "People do desperate things in custody battles, Mr. Marlowe." "I didn't coach her," Bo said firmly. "Did I know she was recording? Yes. Did I tell her to provoke Lena? Absolutely not. I specifically told her not to." Nessa studied him for a long moment. "Junie says the same thing. That she decided on her own to stand up to her mother, knowing it might turn violent. That's the truth. It's a dangerous gamble for a 13-year-old to make on her own. Junie's been dealing with Lena's abuse for years," Bo said, leaning forward. "She knows her mother better than anyone. She knew exactly what buttons to push." Nessa's expression softened slightly. "That's what concerns me, Mr. Marlowe. A child shouldn't have to be that strategic just to be safe." "I agree," Bo said, relief flooding through him as he realized Nessa was on their side. "That's why we're fighting this custody battle. Junie deserves better." "She does," Nessa agreed. She opened a folder on her desk, pulling out a slim sheaf of papers. "I've been working on my evaluation for Thursday's hearing. In light of this new evidence, I'll be revising my recommendation." "To what?" "Full custody to you, with supervised visitation for Ms. Hollis if Junie wants it at all." Nessa's professional demeanor cracked slightly, a flash of genuine emotion showing through. "What I saw on that video was inexcusable. I won't be party to placing a child back in that environment." The county courthouse stood like a stern patriarch at the center of town, all imposing columns and weathered stone steps. Bo parked in the public lot across the street, checking his watch 45 minutes early, just as their lawyer had advised. "Remember," he said to Junie as they walked toward the building, "you only have to tell the truth. That's all." Junie nodded, her face solemn behind the curtain of hair she'd let fall to partially hide the fading bruise. She wore a simple blue dress with a cardigan, clothes that were neat but not showy, appropriate for a girl her age. The opposite of the tight, glittery outfits Lena always tried to force on her. Their lawyer, Carl Jensen, met them on the courthouse steps, a solid man with thinning hair and the steady presence of someone who had seen it all but could still be surprised. He shook Bo's hand firmly. "Everything's filed," he confirmed. The video, the hospital report, Junie's journal, the photos of previous injuries. Judge Rusk has had it all since yesterday afternoon. And Lena's sighed. Bo asked, Carl's expression tightened. Marty filed a motion to exclude the video as evidence of parental alienation. Claimed you manipulated Junie into provoking Lena to create false evidence. That's ridiculous, Bo said, keeping his voice low so Junie wouldn't hear. Anyone who watches that video can see. I know, Carl cut him off. The judge denied the motion. The video stays in, but be prepared Marty's going to come at this hard. He'll try to paint you as obsessive, controlling. He'll say Junie is troubled, acting out. Let him try, Bo said, his jaw set. We have the truth. Inside, the courthouse was all polished wood and hushed voices. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor as Carl led them to Family Court 3, where a small crowd had already gathered outside. Dory was there, pacing nervously in her best blazer. She rushed over when she saw them. How are you holding up, kiddo? She asked Junie. Her usual bluntness softened with concern. I'm okay, Junie said, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. Just want it to be over. It will be soon, Dory promised, squeezing her shoulder gently. She turned to Bo, lowering her voice. Lena's already inside with a boyfriend, and about 6 friends she dragged in for moral support. Of course she was. Lena never missed an opportunity for an audience. At 9:05, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors, and they filed in. The room was smaller than Bo had expected, intimate almost, with dark wood paneling and uncomfortable-looking benches. At the front, Judge Halden Rusk sat behind an imposing desk, reviewing papers with a frown etched into his leathery face. Lena sat at the table to the left, her posture perfect in a modest cream-colored dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a PDA meeting. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup subtle, the perfect picture of a concerned mother. Beside her, Marty Dimes leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of a man who expected to win. He was younger than Carl, with an expensive haircut and a smile that never reached his eyes. Avery was nowhere to be seen. Smart move on Lena's part. Instead, she'd surrounded herself with carefully selected friends, mostly women, who sat in the gallery looking appropriately somber. Bo, Junie, and Carl took their places at the right table. Dory slipped into the bench directly behind them, a solid presence at their backs. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Rusk set aside his papers. Family Court of Deschutes County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Halden Rusk presiding. Everyone stood, then sat as the judge nodded. He looked out over the courtroom with tired eyes, his gaze finally settling on Junie. Before we begin, Rusk said, his voice a gravelly rumble, I want to make one thing clear. This is not a criminal trial. This is a hearing to determine what custody arrangement best serves the interests of a minor child. I expect civility from all parties. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, Carl and Marty said in unison. Good. Mr. Dimes, as you file the motion for full custody, you may begin. Marty rose with theatrical grace, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. As you know, my client, Ms. Lena Hollis, is seeking full custody of her daughter, Junie Marlowe, with limited visitation for the father, Mr. Bo Marlowe. He moved to stand in front of their table, his back straight, voice carrying to every corner of the room. We believe this change is necessary because Mr. Marlowe has engaged in a systematic campaign to alienate Junie from her mother coaching the child to reject Ms. Hollis's love and guidance, encouraging disobedience and disrespect. Bo felt his hands curl into fists under the table. Next to him, Junie sat perfectly still, her face a careful blank. Ms. Hollis is a devoted mother who has maintained a successful career while always prioritizing her daughter's well-being, Marty continued. She provides Junie with cultural experiences, social opportunities, and the kind of nurturing environment every growing girl needs. The performance continued for nearly 20 minutes, Marty painting Lena as the wounded, loving mother and Bo as the bitter ex-husband poisoning their daughter's mind. He didn't directly mention the video or the hospital report, but danced around them, suggesting that recent events were the result of Bo's manipulation rather than Lena's actions. Throughout it all, Lena sat with her hands folded, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. A perfect performance of maternal distress. When Marty finally concluded, Carl rose with less flourish but equal determination. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of parental alienation, but of a father desperate to protect his child from documented abuse." He gestured to the file on the judge's desk. "The evidence is clear and disturbing. Ms. Hollis has repeatedly subjected Junie to emotional and physical abuse. The video submitted to the court shows Ms. Hollis striking Junie, throwing her to the ground, and kicking her an assault that required medical attention." Lena made a small sound of protest, quickly stifled. Judge Rust's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Carl was more concise than Marty, focusing on facts rather than emotional appeals. He referenced Junie's journal, the pattern of controlling behavior from Lena, the emotional manipulation documented over years. When he mentioned Avery's inappropriate comments about Junie's appearance, a murmur ran through the courtroom. When Carl finished, Judge Rust called a brief recess before testimony would begin. As they stood, Bo caught Lena staring at him across the room, her eyes cold despite the tears she'd manufactured for the judge. She turned away quickly, accepting hugs from her supporters, playing the role of the wounded mother to perfection. "How are you holding up?" Bo asked Junie quietly as they stepped into the hallway. "Fine," she said, but her fingers were twisting the hem of her cardigan, a nervous tell she'd had since childhood. "Will I have to talk soon?" "Probably," Bo admitted. "But remember, just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." Judge Rusk leaned back in his chair, studying them both over his glasses. For a long moment, the courtroom was silent save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of paper. Then the judge did something unexpected. He looked directly at Junie. "Young lady," he said, his gruff voice gentler than before, "I asked you many questions in my chambers, and you answered them all clearly and thoughtfully. But there's one more thing I'd like to ask you here in open court." Junie straightened, nodding slightly. "Why do you want to stay with your father?" The directness of the question seemed to catch everyone off guard. Marty half rose from his seat, as if to object, then thought better of it and sat back down. Lena leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Junie stood slowly, her slight frame somehow seeming taller than before. She looked first at the judge, then at her mother. "Because he sees me," she said simply, "not as an extension of himself, or as a prop, or as something to control. Just as me." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it up. "I brought the video of what she does at night." The courtroom went perfectly, absolutely still. "What video is this?" Judge Rusk asked, his brow furrowed. "We've already seen the footage of the assault." "Not that one," Junie said quietly. "This one shows what happened the weekend before, when Mom and Avery were on the couch, and they didn't know I could see them, and what Mom did when she realized I was watching." Understanding dawned on the judge's face. He motioned to the bailiff. "Please give that to Ms. Dorn." Nessa stood, accepting the flash drive from Junie with a slight nod of encouragement. She walked to the laptop connected to the courtroom's video system, inserted the drive, and navigated to the file. "Your Honor," Lena's voice was high panicked. "I don't know what she's talking about, but—" "Be seated, Ms. Hollis." Judge Rusk cut her off. "Ms. Dorn, please play the file." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the large monitor on the wall came to life. The footage was grainier than the kitchen video, clearly taken from a hidden camera in what looked like an air vent or a bookshelf, angled toward the living room of Lena's house. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows across the white leather couch. There, in full view of the camera, were Lena and Avery naked, intimate, clearly intoxicated. Empty wine bottles and what looked like drug paraphernalia littered the coffee table. Their voices carried clearly, loud and careless, as if they'd forgotten a child slept upstairs. Then came movement from the edge of the frame. Junie, appearing at the bottom of the stairs in pajamas, clearly seeking water or the bathroom. The moment she saw what was happening, she froze, eyes wide with shock, Lena's head turned. Saw her daughter watching, and her face transformed from pleasure to rage in an instant. "What are you doing?" Lena's voice, slurred but venomous. "Are you spying on us, you little freak?" Junie backpedaled, clearly terrified. "No, I needed water." "Liar." Lena shoved Avery aside, standing naked and swaying. "You're always watching, always judging, just like your father." "I'm sorry," Junie whimpered, backing toward the stairs. "I didn't mean to." The camera captured in terrible clarity what happened next. Lena lunging forward, grabbing a heavy crystal vase from the side table. Junie turning to run. The vase leaving Lena's hand in a vicious arc, missing Junie's head by inches and shattering against the wall in an explosion of glass. "Next time I won't miss." Lena screamed, advancing on her terrified daughter. "Get out of my sight." The video continued just long enough to show Junie fleeing up the stairs, Lena collapsing back onto the couch in drunken rage, and Avery actually laughing as he poured another drink. Then the screen went black. The courtroom remained silent, frozen in collective horror. Bo felt sick, physically ill, though he'd already seen the footage when Junie first showed it to him. Seeing it again, in this public setting, made it somehow more real, more monstrous. Judge Rusk's face had gone stony, his eyes like flint as he turned to look at Lena, who sat pale and rigid at her table. "It's edited," she blurted, voice shaking. "It's not. He made that somehow. It's fake. The timestamp matches the metadata." "Your Honor," Nessa said quietly. "And it corresponds to the journal entry Junie made that same night, which is already in evidence. This should be thrown out." Marty Dimes stood, his usual smoothness cracking under pressure. "This was never submitted during discovery. It's prejudicial. It was submitted to me during my interview with Junie in chambers," Judge Rusk interrupted coldly. "And I've reviewed it carefully. The content is deeply disturbing but relevant to these proceedings." He turned to Junie, who remained standing, shoulders back despite the tremor in her hands. "Why did you wait until now to show this video?" Junie's voice was small but steady. "I was ashamed. I didn't want everyone to see that. But then I thought about going back there, living with her, and I knew I had to show the truth." Judge Rusk nodded once, his face softening momentarily. "You may be seated." Junie sat, and Bo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of her courage, her sacrifice. To expose such a private violation for the sake of her own safety, it was a burden no child should have to bear. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, Judge Rusk said, straightening the papers before him, "I am prepared to rule on this matter." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Lena was shaking visibly now, her perfect facade crumbling as she realized what was coming. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Junie Marlowe, is hereby awarded to the father, Bo Marlowe, effective immediately. Bo closed his eyes briefly, relief washing through him in a wave so powerful it left him lightheaded. "Ms. Hollis," the judge continued, his voice hardening, "your visitation rights are suspended pending completion of a psychiatric evaluation and substance abuse treatment program. Additionally, a protective order is issued prohibiting you from contact with the minor child except through court-approved channels." "No!" Lena shrieked, surging to her feet. "This isn't right. He planned this. He turned her against me." "Ms. Hollis, control yourself," the judge warned. But Lena was beyond control now, her true face fully revealed as she lunged toward Bo and Junie, finger pointing accusingly. "You did this. You poisoned her against me." Two court officers moved quickly to intercept her, gently but firmly taking her arms. Marty Dimes tried to calm her, murmuring urgently in her ear, but she shook him off, her rage building rather than diminishing. "Junie," she cried, struggling against the officers. "Tell them the truth. Tell them how your father made you say these things." Junie didn't respond, didn't even look at her mother. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her expression blank, as if she'd retreated deep inside herself, where Lena's voice couldn't reach. "Get her out of here," Judge Rusk ordered, and the officers began escorting a still struggling Lena toward the door. "This isn't over," she called back, makeup streaked with real tears now, her carefully constructed image in ruins. "He can't take you from me, Junie. I'm your mother." The doors closed behind her, cutting off her cries. In the sudden silence that followed, Bo turned to Junie, searching her face for any sign of distress. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, still looking straight ahead. "I want to go home now." "Okay," Bo said simply. "Let's go home." They left the courthouse through a side door to avoid the small crowd that had gathered in the main lobby. Carl walked them to their car, going over the practical details. The formal custody order would be ready that afternoon. Lena would be served with the protective order before the end of the day. The court would assign a different advocate to monitor Junie's adjustment over the next few months as they drove home. Junie stared out the window, silent except for the occasional direction when Bo asked if she wanted to stop anywhere. No, she just wanted to go home. The following days fell into a new rhythm. School, homework, dinner. No more countdown to weekend visits. No more bracing for Junie's return in a state of silent shock. Just the ordinary flow of life, gradually healing the wounds of the past. A week after the hearing, as Bo was changing the oil in his truck, Junie appeared in the garage doorway, watching him work with that quiet intensity that was so much a part of her. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. Bo straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Anything. If Mom calls me, if she somehow gets my number, or something, what should I do?" The question caught him off guard. "Has she tried to contact you?" "No," Junie said quickly. "I was just thinking, what if she does?" Bo considered his answer carefully. "That would be your choice," he said finally. "If you want to talk to her, we can go through the proper channels, make it supervised. If you don't, you have every right to say no." Junie nodded, processing this. What if she says she's changed, that she's better now? "Words are easy," Bo said, remembering all the promises Lena had made and broken over the years. "Actions matter more. If she really wants to change, she'll respect your boundaries. She'll get the help she needs. She'll prove it over time." "But you don't think she will?" Junie said, not a question but an observation. Bo sighed, setting down the rag. "I think people can surprise you. But real change is hard and rare." He met her eyes directly. "And you don't owe her the chance to hurt you again." "What about forgiveness?" Junie asked, her voice small. "People always talk about how important that is." "Forgiveness is for you, not for her," Bo said firmly. "It's about letting go of anger that hurts you, not about letting someone back into your life who hasn't earned it." Junie seemed to consider this, her young face solemn with thoughts too heavy for her years. "I don't think I can forgive her," she admitted finally. "Not now. Maybe not ever." "That's okay," Bo said simply. "You don't have to." 3 days later, as Bo and Junie were leaving the grocery store, they saw her Lena standing beside her SUV in the parking lot, looking smaller somehow, without her usual armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark roots showing against the blonde. She wore sunglasses despite the cloudy day, but they couldn't hide the hollowness in her face. She saw them at the same moment they saw her. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lena started toward them, hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Junie," she called, voice breaking. "Please, just listen to me for 1 minute." Bo stepped slightly in front of his daughter, instinctively protective. "Lena, stop. There's a protective order. You can't be here." She halted a few yards away, swaying slightly like a reed in wind. "Please, Bo, don't do this. She's my daughter too. I've lost everything, my home, my boyfriend, my friends. I'm facing jail time. Please don't take her from me too." Junie moved out from behind Bo, her face set in lines of quiet determination. "He didn't take me from you," she said clearly. "You did." Lena flinched as if struck. "Junie, baby, I know I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm getting help now. I'm in a program. I'm seeing a therapist." Her voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "I'm your mother." "No," Junie said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "You're just the person who gave birth to me. A mother protects her child. She doesn't hurt her to make herself feel better." The simple truth of it hung in the air between them. Lena's face crumpled, tears sliding beneath her sunglasses. "Please, Bo, don't do this." Bo placed a steadying hand on Junie's shoulder. "That's far enough, Lena. If you come any closer, I'm calling the police. Please, Bo, don't do this. Lena repeated, her voice breaking. He took in the sight of her, this woman he had once married, once believed he loved. There was a time when her tears would have moved him, when he would have done anything to stop her pain. That time was long past. I didn't do this, Bo said, his voice level. You did. He turned away, guiding Junie toward their truck. Behind them, Lena's composure shattered completely. Please, Junie, she wailed, her voice echoing across the parking lot. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll change. Junie didn't look back, her steps steady beside her father's. Her silence was its own kind of power, now not the fearful silence of before, but the calm certainty of someone who had made their choice. 6 months past. Winter gave way to spring, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed fitting for their new beginning. Bo, with his savings and a small business loan, opened a custom motorcycle shop in a converted warehouse on the edge of town. He named it Clean Slate Customs, a declaration of intent as much as a business name. Junie never responded to Lena's attempts at contact, never asked about her. The protective shell she developed over years of surviving Lena's abuse gradually softened, but the boundary remained firm. No mother was better than the one she'd had. Bo enrolled her in a private school focused on arts and media, recognizing the talent she'd shown with the camera and journal. She thrived there, making real friends for the first time, her natural intelligence flourishing when not constrained by fear. On weekends, she sometimes helped out at the shop, learning to work with her hands the way Bo had taught her. One evening in late summer, Bo came home from the shop to find Junie waiting for him on the porch, a leather-bound notebook in her hands. Not the journal she'd used to document Lena's abuse, this was something newer, thicker. Hey, he said, climbing the steps to sit beside her. What's that? Junie held it out to him, her expression serious but not fearful. My journal, from the last year. She swallowed hard. I want you to read it. When you're ready. Bo took it carefully, aware of the weight of what she was offering, not just a book, but her unfiltered thoughts, her private processing of everything they'd been through. You sure? He asked. She nodded. I'm sure. It helped me understand some things. Maybe it'll help you too. That night, after Junie had gone to bed, Bo sat at the kitchen table and opened the journal. Inside, in Junie's neat handwriting, was the raw, unvarnished record of their year, her fears, her anger, her confusion, her grief for the mother she'd never really had, her fierce, protective love for her father, and, threaded through it all, a resilience that took his breath away. As Bo read the final entry, dated just a week earlier, tears finally broke through the careful control he'd maintained for so long. I used to think being strong meant being quiet, not showing what I felt. But Dad taught me that real strength is about being honest with yourself, with others. It's about standing up when you need to and walking away when you have it out. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of Mom, not of the memories. They're just things that happened, not who I am. Dad and I are going to be okay. Better than okay. We're free. Bo closed the journal, tears tracking silently down his face. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of release. Of recognition for how far they'd come, for the battles they'd fought and won together. He wiped his eyes, put the journal away safely, and checked on Junie one last time before going to bed. She slept peacefully, face relaxed in a way it never had been during the worst times. Her bruises had long since healed, but the fire that had gotten her through that quiet, determined core of strength remained. Outside, the summer night was warm and clear, stars visible through the open window. A new season, a fresh start, and neither of them ever looked back.